The camera was rolling, lights scorching hot above the sleek stage, and the audience clapped on cue, not yet knowing they were seconds away from witnessing something unforgettable. The host, dressed in his signature navy suit and smirking like a man too used to applause, leaned forward with faux charm, eyes gleaming not with curiosity but cruelty. "Jon," he said, voice syrupy smooth, "tell us, what does it feel like to fall from grace? To go from world champion to, well, what some would call a disgrace?" The crowd stiffened. A few chuckled awkwardly. Jon Jones didn't move. He sat in the spotlight, calm, composed. The monster everyone had warned them about, nowhere to be seen. Just a man, holding the silence like it was armor. "Because," the host continued, pressing his advantage, "most people don't get this many second chances. UIs, suspensions, drug tests, scandals. At this point, should we be calling you a fighter or a felon?" Laughter rippled across the room. Jon's jaw twitched, but his eyes remained locked on the man across from him, unblinking, studying, not angry, calculating. What the audience didn't know, what the cameras couldn't see, was the war behind those eyes. Years of climbing, falling, bleeding in silence. Pain he wore like a second skin. Regret etched into bone. He wasn't there for applause. He wasn't even there to defend himself. He was there for something else, something deeper. "I've made mistakes," Jon said finally, voice low, steady, and somehow louder than the crowd's laughter. "More than most, but not more than some. And the difference between us?" He leaned forward slightly. "I fight mine. In public. With blood and sweat. You hide yours behind punchlines." The crowd shifted. Something in the air cracked. Respect, maybe, or the tension between mockery and truth. The host faltered for just a second. "Now, Jon, let's not get dramatic. You invited me here to humiliate me," Jon continued, unmoved. "But let me ask you, what happens when the man you're trying to tear down has already been to hell? What do you take from someone who's got nothing left to prove? Silence? I've lost people, I've failed myself, but every time I've stood back up, not because I'm proud of everything I've done, but because I'm not done fighting to be better. And that scares people. Like you." The host opened his mouth, but no sound came. The teleprompter operator froze. Even the camera crew, seasoned veterans of on-air chaos, stood still. "You don't bring men like me on shows like this to talk," Jon added. "You bring us to bleed, to entertain. But I'm not here to perform, not today." The audience erupted. Not into laughter, but applause. Real, raw, spontaneous. Jon didn't smile. He didn't nod. He just looked into the lens, into the eyes of everyone watching at home, and said, "If you're tired of people using your past to define you, if you've ever fought your way out of your own shadow, subscribe, like, share this, because maybe the world needs fewer critics and more people who keep showing up even when it hurts." The applause didn't stop. It wasn't polite or rehearsed. It was thunderous, rising from the crowd like a wave that caught even the host off guard. For a moment, Jon simply sat in it, letting the sound wash over him, not as validation, but as proof. Proof that the truth, when spoken without fear, still had weight in a world addicted to spectacle. The host, clearly flustered now, shifted in his chair and forced a laugh, hoping to wrestle back control. "Well, that was quite the speech. Maybe we should get you a slot as a motivational speaker." But the sarcasm fell flat. The crowd wasn't with him anymore. Their faces had changed, curious, thoughtful, some even ashamed. Jon glanced at the host, then leaned back slowly, folding his hands. "I didn't come here to change your mind," he said, softer now but firm. "I came here because someone watching this, someone sitting at home in a dark room, thinking they're too far gone to ever come back, they needed to see this." The studio fell into a hush that even the producers behind the glass didn't try to break. Jon's voice dropped a register. "I used to be that person. I've sat in my own darkness more times than I care to admit. I've lost titles, lost family, lost myself. And every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the champ. I saw the addict, the liar, the coward." A pause. "But you know what I did? I stopped running, I stood still, I faced the wreckage. And I fought, one day at a time, to become the kind of man I could respect again. Not for fans, not for cameras, for me." Someone in the audience let out a small gasp. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, wiped her eyes. Behind her, A man with a veteran's ball cap gave a slow, respectful nod. Jon saw them, noted them, carried their reactions like quiet fuel. The host finally spoke, but this time with no smugness. Just a hint of something unexpected. Humility. "I didn't expect this," he said honestly. "I thought you'd dodge, spin, maybe even storm off the set." Jon's lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. "Fighting is what I know. But silence, that's something I had to learn. Pain taught me how to listen." And with that he stood. No mic drop, no grand exit. Just a quiet strength in every step as he walked off stage. The host tried to wrap up, fumbling through his closing remarks, but it was clear. This was no longer his show. It belonged to the moment, to the truth. Backstage, Jon passed a young intern clutching a clipboard. She looked up, eyes wide, then whispered, "Thank you for saying that." He stopped, met her gaze. "Don't wait for someone to believe." "In you," he said. "Believe in yourself first, the rest follows." She nodded, visibly trembling. After Jon left the building, cameras still rolling in the studio, a storm ignited online. The clip hit the internet within minutes. By the time Jon reached his hotel, it had been viewed over 10 million times. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all. High ablaze with praise, debate, apologies, and reflection. Hashtags trended worldwide. Respect Jon Jones, We All Fall, Redemption Live. But Jon didn't read the comments. He turned off his phone, sank into the hotel room armchair, and stared out the window at the city lights. He wasn't chasing headlines. He wasn't seeking forgiveness. He was chasing the man he was always meant to be. One moment, one decision, at a time. The morning after the broadcast, Jon woke before sunrise. The city outside was still asleep, blanketed in silence except for the occasional sound of a distant siren or the faint hum of streetlights buzzing against the cool dawn air. He moved quietly through the hotel room, his body still holding the tension from the night before, though his mind was unusually clear. No notifications, no screens, just silence, just breath. And somewhere inside that stillness, peace. But peace never lasted long in Jon's world. A knock on the door shattered it, not the kind of soft, polite knock you'd expect from room service. It was firm, urgent, a knock that carried weight. Jon opened it slowly and was met by an older man in a grey suit and wire-rimmed glasses, holding a leather folder under one arm and a nervous smile on his face. "Mr. Jones," the man said, "my name is Richard Geller. I represent the National Recovery Alliance. We saw your interview last night and, well, I think you may have saved more lives than you realize." Jon raised an eyebrow, letting the man in without a word. Richard stepped inside, unfolding the folder like it contained something fragile. "We run a nationwide program for people battling addiction. Most of our funding is private. We've struggled to connect with the younger demographic, especially men. But then last night happened. Your words, they weren't just honest, they were needed." Jon listened, not moving, hands clasped in front of him. "So, what do you want from me?" he finally asked. Richard looked up. "Not a speech, not a commercial. Just presence. We're holding a summit next month. Survivors, families, counselors, I want you there. Not as a celebrity, as someone who's been through it." Jon didn't answer right away. His mind flashed to nights he couldn't remember and mornings he couldn't forget. To the faces of those who'd walked away, to the brother he lost, to the mirror that had shown him a monster more times than a champion. "I'll think about that," he said quietly. Richard nodded, seeming to understand that was the only answer he'd get for now. As the man left, Jon turned back to the window. Down on the street, people were starting to stir. Coffee carts, runners, taxi horns. The world was moving again, unaware of how many lives were shifting, growing, healing beneath the surface. Later that day, Jon visited a local gym, one he used to train at when he was still just a name on a poster, not a headline. The walls hadn't changed. The smell of sweat and ambition still hung in the air. He was greeted like family, though no one rushed him. There was something sacred about the silence between fighters. In the back corner of the gym, a young man, no older than 20, was hitting the bag with anger, not rhythm. Jon watched for a moment, then approached. "Your timing's off," he said. The kid turned, defensive, then blinked. "You're Jon Jones." "Not today," Jon said. "Today I'm just someone who's made a lot of mistakes and still showed up anyway." The kid nodded, hesitated, then asked, "How do you stop being angry all the time?" Jon took a breath. "You don't. You learn to fight with it instead. From it. Anger's not your enemy, shame is. Let go of that and you'll start winning real fights." The boy looked like he might cry, but instead he nodded, went back to the bag and found a rhythm. That night, alone again, Jon finally turned his phone on. Messages poured in. From fans, from haters, from fighters and reporters and people he didn't even know. But one stood out, a short message from someone he hadn't heard from in over a decade. "You were right to leave, but you were also right to come back. I'm proud of you." It was from his estranged father, a man he had loved and resented in equal measure. Jon stared at the message for a long time, the screen blurring slightly from tears he didn't expect. He didn't reply. Not yet. But he would. In time. 2 days later, Jon Jones stood in a small church basement in a neighborhood most people tried to forget. The folding chairs were mismatched, the lighting was dim, and the air carried the faint scent of burnt coffee and old wood. There was no stage, no spotlight, just a circle of about 12 people, some older, some barely adults, all seated quietly, their eyes fixed on the man who had changed the conversation just 48 hours ago. Jon didn't wear a suit. He didn't bring an entourage. He didn't even wear the heavyweight belt he'd once carried like armor. He just wore truth, and it fit better than anything else ever had. "I wasn't always the guy you saw on TV," he began, his voice low but steady. "I was the kid who couldn't say no, to pressure, to anger, to escape. The spotlight made it worse, not better." A woman in the circle nodded slightly, arms folded across her chest like she was holding herself together. A teenage boy near her shifted, clearly uncomfortable, clearly listening. "When you lose yourself," Jon continued, "the hardest part isn't finding your way back. It's facing the wreckage you left behind." No one interrupted. No one needed to. His words did what they were meant to, cut through the layers of fear and pride that so many in that room carried like invisible chains. After the meeting, a man approached him. Mid-40s, rough hands, eyes that had seen too much. "You don't know me," the man said, "but I used to fight. Not like you. Backyard stuff. Broke my wrist in a parking lot trying to be tough. Got hooked on the pain meds, lost everything." He paused, swallowing hard. "I was going to end it last week, but then I saw that clip. You didn't sound like a champ. You sounded like one of us." Jon didn't offer a motivational quote. He didn't try to fix the man. He just reached out and gripped his shoulder, grounding him. That night, as Jon walked alone back to his car under the flickering streetlights, he realized something had changed. He didn't feel hunted anymore by fame, by shame. He felt useful, not for punches thrown, but for truths shared. But the world doesn't let you grow quietly, not when your name is Jon Jones. The next morning, a viral headline exploded across social media. "Host apologizes to Jon Jones on air after viewer backlash." Jon watched the clip, stunned. The same host who had tried to humiliate him days earlier now sat behind the same desk with an entirely different tone. "I misjudged," the man said. "Not just Jon, but what he represents. I let ego get in the way of empathy, and for that I was wrong." The apology wasn't perfect. It felt rehearsed in places, but it was real enough. Jon turned the screen off. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just nodded once, slowly. Later that afternoon, as he walked into a rehab center he'd agreed to visit off the books, a nurse greeted him at the door. She had tired eyes, but a warm smile. "We've had 4 new admissions since your interview," she said quietly. "All," said the same thing. "If he can talk about it, maybe I can too." Jon looked around the lobby, people waiting, hoping, afraid. "Then let's get to work," he said. Inside he met with groups, with staff, with families. Not as a star, as a man who knew what it meant to fall, who understood what it meant to get up bleeding, again and again, not for glory, but for survival. By the time he left, it was dark, and yet something inside him felt light for the first time in years. Redemption didn't come with a belt. It came with moments like these, quiet ones, human ones that couldn't be broadcast but would echo louder than any crowd, and somewhere deep down Jon felt it. This was no longer the end of a career. It was the beginning of something much bigger. 3 weeks had passed since the interview that shook the world. In that time, Jon Jones had done what few expected. He disappeared from the spotlight entirely. No podcasts, no interviews, no training. Montages, just silence. And in that silence, something remarkable happened. The noise around him didn't swell in chaos. It softened into curiosity, then reflection. For the first time, people weren't just talking about Jon Jones. They were talking about why his story mattered. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when his team received a surprising request, not from a talk show or a news network, but from a small community center in Detroit. A youth mentorship program had written to Jon directly. Not a PR stunt, no cameras. Just a letter, handwritten, signed by a dozen boys and girls who said they had never believed in second chances, till they watched him take one live on national TV. Jon read the letter in his hotel room, slowly, as if each word held weight. And when he reached the end, where a boy named Marcus had written, "If someone like you can still be good, maybe someone like me can too," Jon didn't hesitate. The next day he was on a flight. No press knew, no headlines followed. But inside that small gym in Detroit, surrounded by cracked walls and mismatched sneakers and dreams that had barely survived childhood, Jon stood tall, not as a fighter, but as proof. The kids didn't ask about fame. They asked about fear, about failure, about how to face the world when it tells you you're broken. And Jon, with no notes, no script, told them the truth. "You're not broken," he said. "You're bruised. You've been hit, yeah, but you're still standing. You're still breathing, and that means you're still fighting." He trained with them, ate with them, laughed in a way he hadn't in years. And when he left, it wasn't with a speech or a gift bag. It was with a promise to come back. On his way to the airport, he got a call from his manager. "You won't believe this," the man said. "That host, the one who came at you on air, he just reached out, personally, said he wants to meet off camera, says he owes you something." Jon paused. "He owes himself something," he said, then ended the call. But something tugged at him. That interview had been a pivot point, not just for him, but for the world watching. And maybe, just maybe, it needed a proper ending. So a week later, Jon walked into the same studio, same lights, same desk, but no live broadcast. Just the host, waiting quietly, a glass of water sweating beside him. "You didn't have to come," the man said, "but I'm glad you did." Jon nodded. "You didn't have to invite me, but I'm here." They talked, not as adversaries, as men. The host confessed what Jon already knew, that the humiliation had been scripted, designed to provoke, that ratings had mattered more than integrity, that he had crossed a line. Jon didn't gloat. He listened, and when the host finally stopped, Jon said something unexpected. "I'm not angry anymore," he said, "but I'll tell you what I've learned. Truth always comes out, and when it does, it either sets you free or exposes you. You decide which." The host nodded, eyes lowered. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start. And sometimes that's all people need. As Jon left the studio, the sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. He walked slowly, phone in his pocket, unread messages waiting. But for now, he didn't need them. What he had was enough. And as he disappeared into the evening crowd, no cameras, no fans, he carried with him something far more powerful than a legacy: peace. Months later, Jon found himself standing in front of a crowd far different from any arena or stage he had known. This wasn't a place for fights or interviews. It was a community hall filled with people who had walked paths as messy and complicated as his own. Faces lined with stories of struggle, resilience, and hope looked up at him, waiting for more than a speech. They wanted connection. As he spoke, Jon shared the raw truth behind his public fall and rise. He talked about the loneliness behind fame, the pain behind mistakes, and the courage it takes to rebuild not just a career but a life. "We all have battles no one sees," he said, "but it's how we face those battles that define us, not what the world thinks, but what we know deep inside." Among the crowd was a teenage girl who approached him afterward. Her eyes shone with tears and determination. "You made me believe," she whispered, "that even when everything feels broken, there's still a chance." Jon smiled softly, feeling something shift inside him. a quiet pride not in victory, but in impact. The days that followed were quieter but fuller. Jon spent time mentoring not to build a brand, but to lift others the way he wished someone had lifted him. And then, one evening, a message popped up on his phone. It was from the TV host. This time, no script, no agenda, just a simple line. "Thank you for showing me the better way." Jon stared at the words, and in that moment he realized the real victory wasn't in proving others wrong or winning fights. It was in choosing to be better, to forgive, to grow, to hope, because sometimes the hardest battles don't happen under bright lights or in crowded arenas. They happen inside us. And when we win those, everything else follows. Jon Jones looked out the window, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. He wasn't the same man who walked into that hostile interview months ago. He was someone stronger, humbler, and more real. And as he whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning," he knew the story was far from over. But this chapter was finally complete. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more journeys of resilience and redemption, because everyone deserves a second chance.